So let's now prove the second fundamental theorem of calculus. So the proof of the first one was quite complicated and not really that satisfying. The proof of this second one is absolutely stunning. So you're in for a treat. So let's just remind ourselves of what the second fundamental theorem of calculus says. So we've got our function f here, and we're saying it's differentiable everywhere on the closed interval ab. So the derivative, therefore, is a real valued function to find on the whole of the interval. And we need the assumption that this derivative function is Riemann integrable over that interval ab, because unfortunately, even though you might think it would be the case, it is not the case that it being a derivative of another function means automatically that it will be Riemann integrable over that interval. That isn't true. There are counterexamples where a function is a derivative of a function but isn't Riemann integrable. So we do need the assumption that this is Riemann integrable over that interval ab, and if that is the case, then the second fundamental theorem of calculus is that the value of the integral from a to b of f prime t dt is equal to the initial function f, the antiderivative function, evaluated at the upper bound of the interval, minus the function f evaluated at the lower bound of the interval a. So the way we're going to prove this is by thinking about other Riemann sums of the function f prime apart from the upper and lower Riemann sums. So I've drawn a picture here. Here's our interval ab, and here this is representing our function f prime that is defined over this interval ab, and which we are assuming is Riemann integrable. So I'm now going to introduce you to the concept of a general Riemann sum. So we've previously seen upper and lower Riemann sums. They are actually just very special cases of a much more general concept, which is the concept of a general Riemann sum. So let's say we have a general dissection of our interval ab, which we'll call D, and an example is shown here on the picture. And let's say this general dissection splits the interval ab into little n subintervals. Then the definition for a general Riemann sum is as follows. We'll call it S for sum, and it's the sum from I is equal to 1 to n of xi minus 1, so those are the lengths of all of the subintervals that the dissection has split the overall interval into. So for instance, when I is equal to 1, we've got x1 minus x0, and of course x0 is a. That x1 is this first cut of the dissection, so that will give you the length of the first interval. Then this is x2, this is x1, so when I is equal to 2, you'll get x2 minus x1, which will give you the length of that subinterval, and so on, all the way up to I is equal to n, and xn is b, and xn minus 1 is this cut to the left of b, so xn minus 1 will give you the length of this subinterval. And then what we've got here is the function f prime evaluated at something that I've called pi, where pi is any point inside the ith subinterval. So p1 would be a point in the first subinterval, p2 would be some point in the second subinterval, all the way up to the nth subinterval where pn would be inside it. So in general, a Riemann sum is anything of this form, and you can pick whatever pi's you like as long as they are inside the relevant subintervals. Any such choice of pi's, if you compute this, that is a type of Riemann sum. So in fact, the upper and lower Riemann sums are just extremely special cases of this much more general concept. So for every single one of these Riemann sums, no matter what choice of pi you use, you can conclude the following inequality, that the value of the Riemann sum will be less than or equal to the value of the upper Riemann sum of the function f prime over the same dissection, and it will be greater than or equal to the value of the lower Riemann sum of the function f prime over that same dissection. And the reason you're able to conclude this is, of course, if you think about the formulae for the upper and lower Riemann sums, it's exactly like this. So the upper Riemann sum would be the sum from I is equal to 1 to n of the lengths of all the subintervals times the supremum of the value of the function over each of the subintervals. Now, of course, this inequality will hold true. The supremum of the value of the function over a subinterval will always be greater than or equal to the value of the function at any point in the subinterval. So whatever choice for, let's take as example the subinterval 1, whatever choice you make of p1, it's always going to be the case that f prime at p1 is less than or equal to the supremum of f prime over that first interval. And that will hold true not just for the first subinterval, but for the second, the third, all the way up to the nth. So this holds true for all of them, and therefore when you compute this whole sum, you're adding together a bunch of things that are less than or equal to the corresponding things over in the sum for the upper Riemann sum, and therefore the thing you'll end up with is going to be less than or equal to this. And it's the same argument for the lower Riemann sums, just the mirror image of it. So the lower Riemann sum, if we wrote it out, it would be the sum from I is equal to 1 to n of the lengths of the subintervals times the infimum of the function f prime over each of the subintervals. And of course that value is always going to be less than or equal to the value of the function, no matter what pi you choose. So again, in this sum, you've got corresponding terms to the terms in this sum, and every single one of them is going to be less than or equal to the corresponding term over here. So when you sum them all up, the overall answer will be less than or equal to this. Now we're going to construct a very special Riemann sum, and it's going to allow us to prove what we want to prove. So I've drawn another picture here. Here's our interval AB. I've translated the dissection that we've got up here, or tried to translate it down to here. But now this isn't representing the function f prime. This is representing the original function, the antiderivative of f prime, the thing that differentiates to make f prime. And we're going to use this function to choose a very special Riemann sum of f prime. So we're going to make use of the mean value theorem. So I hope you remember the mean value theorem. So to give you an example of what we're going to do, let's take the first subinterval here. So remember, x0 is the other name for the lower bound of the interval a. x1 is then the name for this first cut, and they are the lower and upper bound, respectively, of the first subinterval. Now, x0 is being mapped onto f of x0, x1 is being mapped onto f of x1. And now what I've done is connect those 2 points with a straight line, and that is of course the secant line. And the gradient of that secant line is going to be the change in y, which is f of x1 minus f of x, divided by the change in x, which is going to be x1 minus x0. And what the mean value theorem says is that there is some point properly contained within the interval x0, x1, so in between x0 and x1, properly in between them, such that the value of the derivative of the function at that point is equal to the gradient of the secant line. And you can see it's kind of roughly here on the picture. So we'll call that point that's in between the two, we'll call that P1, and here f prime at P1 is going to equal this. And this is going to be the point P1 that we're going to use in our Riemann sum for f prime up here. Now the mean value theorem of course has criteria in order for it to hold true. In particular, those criteria are that the function f must be continuous everywhere over the closed interval from x0 to x1 and must be differentiable everywhere on the open interval from x0 to x1. Now our function obeys actually slightly stronger criteria because it is of course differentiable everywhere over the interval AB, and therefore it is differentiable over this subinterval x0 to x1, and we know that differentiability implies continuity, so it's going to be continuous everywhere over that subinterval, and it's also going to be differentiable everywhere over that subinterval, so it does obey the criteria in order for you to be able to apply the mean value theorem. And of course, it's not just the case that we can do this for the first subinterval, we can do this for the second subinterval, the third subinterval, etc., all the way up to the nth subinterval. So in general, this is how we're going to pick our pi's for this Riemann sum. We're going to pick pi for the ith subinterval such that the value of the derivative function f prime at pi is equal to the value of the original function evaluated at xi minus the value of the original function evaluated at xi minus 1, so that's the correct subinterval, that's the ith subinterval, this is the upper bound of the ith subinterval, this is the lower bound of the ith subinterval, that's the change in y, and then this is the change in x, xi minus 1, and it's exactly the logic that we've seen here. This is the gradient of that secant line, and by the mean value theorem there will exist a pi that is properly in between these two, such that the value of the derivative at that point is equal to the gradient of that secant line. So what is so brilliant about this choice of PIs? Well, all we need to do is substitute this in place of f prime pi here, and you'll see how brilliant it is. So our Riemann sum is going to be the sum from I is equal to 1 to n of the lengths of the subintervals, and now here it should be f prime pi, but for each of those i's from 1 to n, we can substitute in this now. So it's going to be f of xi minus f of xi minus 1 divided by xi minus xi minus 1. And of course, for each I from 1 to n, this denominator here is going to cancel with this numerator here. It's never going to equal 0, so we can safely cancel those off. So we're just going to be left with this bit now. So we end up with this, the sum from I is equal to 1 to n of f of xi minus f of xi minus 1. But this is a telescoping sum, so this is going to cancel even more. So if we write this out as I have done here, you can see how it all cancels. So for I is equal to 1, you're going to have f of x1 minus f of x0. Then for I is equal to 2, it's going to be f of x2 minus f of x1. For I is equal to 3, f of x3 minus f of x2, all the way up to I is equal to n, then we'll have f of xn minus f of xn minus 1. But you can see how f of 1 here, you've got a plus sign. Here you've got f of x1 with a minus sign, so this one is going to cancel with this one. F of x2 here is going to cancel with minus f of x2 here. F of x3 here will cancel with minus f of x3 here. All the way up to f of xn minus 1 here will cancel with minus f of xn minus 1 here. So all you'll be left with is this and this. So this cancels to f of xn minus f of x0, but x0 is just another name for a, and xn is just another name for b. So this is f of b minus f of a, that magic thing that we saw in the second fundamental theorem of calculus. So how are we going to use this now to prove what we want to prove? So what I have overall shown you is that for any dissection you take of this interval AB, there is a special Riemann sum that it is possible to construct where you choose the PIs that you're going to use here in a special way using the mean value theorem like this, so that the value of the Riemann sum comes out as this value, f of b minus f of a. So how are we going to use that to show that that's the value of the integral? Well, we're going to use this inequality here. This inequality, remember, holds true for all Riemann sums. So in particular, it holds true for this Riemann sum that we've just produced using the mean value theorem in this way, and hence we can conclude that this value is in between the upper Riemann sum for the dissection and the lower Riemann sum. So we can conclude this, that this value is less than or equal to the upper Riemann sum for your dissection of the function f prime, and greater than or equal to the lower Riemann sum over your dissection for f prime. But here's the brilliant idea. For any dissection D, it is possible to produce a Riemann sum in this way using the mean value theorem such that the value comes out as f of b minus f of a. Hence, this inequality is actually true for every single dissection of the interval AB, and hence you can conclude that this value is less than or equal to all of the upper Riemann sums and greater than or equal to all of the lower Riemann sums. So that's the crucial bit here, that this is going to hold true for all dissections D of this interval AB. Now, if it's the case that this value is less than or equal to the value of all of the upper Riemann sums, then that means that it is a lower bound for the set of upper Riemann sums, in particular that it is less than or equal to the infimum of the set of upper Riemann sums. Similarly, if it is greater than or equal to all of the lower Riemann sums, it is an upper bound for the set of all lower Riemann sums, and hence it is going to be greater than or equal to the value of the supremum, the least upper bound of the set of all lower Riemann sums. So writing that out, we have that this value, f of b minus f of a, is less than or equal to the infimum of the set of all upper Riemann sums, and it's greater than or equal to the supremum of the set of all lower Riemann sums. But of course we know what these values are going to be equal to. We know the function f prime by assumption is Riemann integrable, and hence the infimum of the upper Riemann sums is equal to the supremum of the lower Riemann sums is equal to the value of the integral of f prime dt over the interval ab. Hence, from this, we can conclude that this value f of b minus f of a is less than or equal to the value of our integral, and from this one, we can conclude that f of b minus f of a is greater than or equal to the value of our integral, and these two taken together mean one thing. If it's both less than or equal to this value and greater than or equal to this value, there's only one option, which is that it's equal to this value, and hence we have shown that this value, f of b minus f of a, must equal the value of the integral. So we have now completed our proof, therefore, of the second fundamental theorem of calculus. One final comment is just again to emphasize this point that the proof is dependent on that final assumption that the function f prime is Riemann integrable over the interval ab, that the fact that it is the derivative of another function over that interval does not immediately mean that it will be Riemann integrable, and that there are counterexamples to that. And you'll see here in this final bit of the proof, we were able to conclude f of b minus f of a was less than or equal to the infimum of the upper Riemann sums and greater than or equal to the supremum of the lower Riemann sums, but at this point we had to use the fact that the function f prime was Riemann integrable to say that these two things were equal to one another and indeed equal to this value. Our proof doesn't prove that they were equal to the same value. It was relying on the assumption that they would be equal to the same value. So the second fundamental theorem of calculus does not say that this function f prime will be Riemann integrable over that interval. It says that if it is Riemann integrable over that interval, then its value will be f of b minus f of a.